Hey, how's it going? Today, I'm gonna tell you a true story. That sounds like it came straight out of a Hollywood movie. It's a story about ancient dinosaur bones, worth more than gold bars. A plot full of ambitious fossil hunters, million-dollar scams, secret auctions, and a scandal that, out of nowhere, ended up involving some of the most recognizable faces in the film industry. Now, picture this. A rare dinosaur fossil being auctioned off in a luxurious room, with two A-list Hollywood celebrities battling it out, bid by bid. Sounds fake, right? But it actually happened. And the twist at the end? You won't believe it. But you'll only find out who those famous names are and who took that fossil home, or rather, to their mansion at the end of this video. To understand how things escalated all the way to the red carpets of the world's elite, we need to go back. Back to the moment when fossils stopped being just science and started becoming currency. So buckle up and stick with me until the end, because this story is more valuable than any fossil ever dug up. It all started back in 1858 at a forgotten quarry in Haddonfield, New Jersey. A lawyer and amateur geologist named William Parker Falk was digging through layers of ancient rock when he stumbled upon something that would forever change our relationship with Earth's distant past. The bones of a colossal animal buried there for millions of years. It was the skeleton of Hadrosaurus foci, and it became the very first dinosaur fossil ever excavated using scientific methods. A historic milestone that transformed paleontology as we know it. For the first time, science wasn't just pulling bones from the ground, it was pulling out answers. The existence of dinosaurs stopped being mystery or myth and became something concrete, tangible, and extremely valuable. At first, these prehistoric bones were treated as mere scientific curiosities, museum pieces, study tools. But as science advanced and public fascination grew, one thing became clear. Fossils were no longer just remnants of the past. They were turning into treasure. And like all treasure, they began to attract interest. From all sides, the market expanded. Museums competed fiercely to display the biggest skeletons. Millionaires started wanting these relics in their private collections, and prices began to skyrocket. A complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, for example, has already sold for over $30 million. That's right, 30 million, for a creature that walked the Earth 65 million years ago. From that point on, it didn't take long for fossils to start being seen in a different light, a much greedier one. Every new discovery became an opportunity. Every bone a potential deal. What was once the domain of paleontologists and researchers had now become the target of adventurers, black market diggers, and criminals. This was the beginning of a new kind of gold rush. Only this time, the gold had been buried for millions of years, and anyone willing to dig, legally or not, could strike it rich. But if people are paying that much for a fossil, who exactly are these buyers? Who's fueling this market? And how far are they willing to go? To answer that, we need to meet a different kind of character. One who doesn't wear a lab coat, but boots and a wide-brimmed hat. One who often carries more greed than scientific curiosity. We're about to explore the darker side of this story. But before we do, if this opening already got you hooked, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. The next discoveries are even crazier than that $30 million dinosaur. Hit that button because this ride's only getting wilder. With fossils now worth small fortunes, a new kind of character entered the scene. And no, they weren't scientists in white lab coats. They were adventurers, lone diggers, men with shovels, pickaxes, and eyes lit up, not by curiosity, but by the promise of profit. They began wandering across the world in search of bones, crossing deserts, forests, and mountain ranges, chasing any clue that the Earth might be hiding something monumental. And many of them found it, but not always through legal means. These modern-day fossil hunters called themselves explorers, but in practice, many were smugglers. They extracted fossils without permits, without documentation, without any scientific responsibility. And the final destination for those relics wasn't a museum or a university. It was a secret catalog where the fossils vanished forever, sold under the table to the highest bidder. And the rarer the fossil, the higher the price. A complete skull? Jackpot. An articulated skeleton? Bingo! A fossil with footprints, nests, or preserved skin impressions. That was a Jurassic diamond. These men, and in some cases entire families, turned fossil hunting into a way of life. Some became local legends. Others became international fugitives. Over time, they began operating like full-blown trafficking networks, linking illegal diggers in the remotest parts of the planet with millionaires and private collectors on the other side of the world. The craziest part? Many of those buyers had no idea they were part of a crime. Some believed they were participating in legitimate auctions. Others just saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to display a dinosaur in their living room. But eventually, authorities began to suspect there was more to this than just one shady sale. Behind the fossil trade was something much bigger. A shadow network operating like the black market for art, stolen artifacts, and history itself. And among the missing pieces, some weren't just rare. They were one of a kind, irreplaceable. By this point, investigators started connecting the dots. What had seemed like a handful of isolated cases was actually just the surface of something much larger. A hidden web linking illegal diggers, billionaire collectors, and a parallel market of relics that never should have left the ground. And that's when everything began to escalate. The fossil trade crossed borders, took on new forms, and grew into a global operation. A full-blown underground fossil rush swept across the planet, and the world began to buy, sell, and stash away pieces of prehistory like they were precious gems. And that's exactly what you're about to understand next. With fossil prices reaching the millions, it didn't take long for greed to cross borders. Literally. What began with a few ambitious diggers quickly spread like a global fever. It was the birth of a new gold rush. Only this time, the gold was made of fossilized bones. And anyone brave enough to dig deep or cross legal lines had a shot at getting rich. While paleontologists fought to protect archaeological sites and study Earth's ancient past, others were digging in a frenzy, often using tractors and even explosives. They destroyed the scientific context around the fossils, which, in the world of science, is almost like committing a murder against history. The mission was clear: find, extract, sell. From the Gobi Desert in Mongolia to the rocky formations of Argentina's Patagonia, the world became a stage for a hidden hunt. Sites with incredibly rare fossils began to attract not just scientists, but international smugglers. Secret routes emerged, funneling these precious finds straight into private collections, far from public view. Enforcement was weak, especially in countries rich in fossils but poor in resources. Many specimens crossed borders hidden in suitcases, boxes disguised as decorative rocks, or containers labeled as generic geological material. And once they left their country of origin, tracking them down became nearly impossible. The black market thrived. Secret auctions were organized with buyers flying in from around the world. Some of these events took place in the basements of upscale antique shops. Others were held in five-star hotels, behind closed doors, accessed by codes and invitation only. Fossils of velociraptors, protoceratops, tarbosaurs, even entire nests with fossilized eggs, were all changing hands in private, far from science, far from humanity. What should have been studied and shared with the world was now turned into luxury decor. And the worst part? The countries where these fossils were taken from, places like Mongolia and China, started realizing that large portions of their prehistoric heritage were vanishing. By this point, it was clear something was very wrong. But the biggest scandal was still ahead. And when it hit hard, with the discovery of a fossil so stunning, so complete, and so rare, it sparked a public firestorm. A clash involving scientists, collectors, lawyers, politicians, and even the United States government. It was the case that put the fossil black market on the international news for the first time. And it all started with a colossal creature, nearly 43 feet long, found on Native American land in South Dakota. Her name? Sue. And from here on, the story hits a whole new level. In 1990, on the rugged hills of the Cheyenne River Indian Reservation in South Dakota, a group of paleontologists led by Susan Hendrickson quite literally stumbled upon the discovery of a lifetime. A bone was emerging from the ground, unmistakable in shape, the massive femur of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Over the following months, a team from the Black Hills Institute, under the direction of Peter Larson, excavated what would turn out to be the most complete, best preserved, and most spectacular T-Rex skeleton ever found. Roughly 90% of the skeleton was intact, an unprecedented rarity. They named it Sue in honor of its discoverer. The scientific world was electrified. This find had the potential to reshape our understanding of the biology, posture, and even behavior of the king of dinosaurs. But before researchers could dig deeper, chaos broke out. You see, the land where Sue was found belonged to a man named Maurice Williams, a member of the Sioux tribe, and it was legally protected by the federal government. He claimed he had never formally authorized the removal of the bones. What seemed like an epic discovery suddenly turned into a legal firestorm. The FBI got involved. Federal agents raided the Black Hills Institute, seized Sue, and launched a full-blown investigation. Peter Larson, the head of the excavation, ended up in jail, not for the theft itself, but for tax-related charges linked to fossil trading. Even so, the case became a symbol. It was the first major public clash between science, money, and the ownership of Earth's ancient past. Then came the auction. In 1997, Sue's skeleton was put up for sale by Sotheby's, one of the most prestigious auction houses in the world. Starting bid? $1 million. But that number quickly became a joke. Millionaires, museums, and even celebrities jumped into the race. When the final gavel fell, Sue had sold for $8.36 million. The buyer? The Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, backed by Disney and McDonald's. Yes, McDonald's helped buy a T-Rex. Can you believe that? And hey, if that part made you go, wait, what? Go ahead and hit the like button on this video, because trust me, things are only going to get crazier from here. Sue was finally put on public display, where she remains to this day. But her legacy didn't stay in the bones. She was the first to fully expose the true value of a fossil, and how that value could ignite legal battles, private interests, and even federal involvement. From that moment on, the world began to look at the fossil market with new eyes. After all, if a single skeleton could be worth nearly $10 million, imagine how many others were being sold in silence, far from the spotlight. And they were. The next stop in this story takes us to a place where the underground fossil trade became almost an institution. A place as rich in dinosaurs as it is in secrets. Mongolia, here we come. If there's one place on Earth where the underground is practically a Jurassic vault, it's the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. One of the richest paleontological sites on the planet. Home to fossils of velociraptors, protoceratops, oviraptors, and even entire dinosaurs still curled up inside fossilized eggs. But while science saw that land as a treasure trove for humanity, the black market saw it as pure opportunity. Over the last few decades, hundreds, possibly thousands, of fossils have been stolen from Mongolian territory and smuggled into the West. Many of these bones ended up in antique shops, private collections, discreet galleries, and yes, luxury auctions where celebrities and millionaires battled for the winning bid. Mongolia, which by law prohibits the export of fossils, began to realize that its heritage was simply disappearing. In 2012, red flags were raised. A complete skeleton of Tarbosaurus bataar, a close cousin of the T-Rex, surfaced at an auction in New York. The fossil, nearly 26 feet long, was publicly listed and valued at over $1 million. Even worse, it was treated as a decorative item, with no mention of its suspicious origin. But this time, Mongolia didn't stay silent. The government filed a lawsuit in the United States demanding the immediate return of the fossil. And that's when the truth came out. The specimen had been illegally extracted from the Gobi Desert and sold by a man named Eric Prokopi, an American dealer with a history of fossil smuggling. Prokopi was arrested, and the Tarbosaurus returned to Mongolia. But the scandal was far from over. Shortly after, another Tarbosaurus skull popped up, this time in the hands of a very famous actor. Someone who had won the peace in a fierce bidding war against another celebrity, at what seemed to be a legitimate auction. But without knowing it, he had found himself at the center of an international crime. His name? Well, it's not time to reveal that just yet. I know you're curious, But trust me, it's worth the wait. To fully grasp the weight of this story and the impact of that reveal, you need to see everything that led up to it. The truth is, this case opened the floodgates to a wave of returns. A trail of looted fossils began to be traced all the way to luxury homes, corporate offices, and celebrity mansions. To this day, Mongolia is still fighting to recover everything that was taken. But what those fossils told us, without speaking a single word, was something the world could no longer ignore. Dinosaur trafficking was real, profitable, and deeply hidden. And when US authorities realized how deep the rabbit hole went, they decided to act. That's when the largest operation against fossil smuggling in history was born. It had a name worthy of a blockbuster, Operation Raptor. When the trail of illegal fossils started turning up at luxury addresses across the United States, authorities realized something important. This was no longer an isolated case. It was a network. And where there's a network, there's structure. Where there's structure, there's crime. That's how Operation Raptor was born, led by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement in partnership with the Department of Justice. A name straight out of a blockbuster for an operation that brought together federal agents, prosecutors, scientists, and international diplomats. The main target? Eric Procopi, a fossil dealer from Florida who presented himself as a restorer and seller of historical specimens. But behind the scenes, he was the middleman connecting illegal diggers in Mongolia to the most elite auction houses in the US. And Procopi was good at what he did. He would receive disassembled, damaged, and illegal fossils, restore them in his lab, then create fake documents to make them look legitimate. After that, the pieces were inserted into high-end auctions and sold for millions to collectors, many of whom had no idea they were buying smuggled goods. Among the fossils he dealt were skeletons of Tarbosaurus, Oviraptor, Saurolophus, and even entire nests with fossilized eggs. Specimens that should have been in museums or universities being studied by science, but instead, they ended up in the homes of the rich and famous. The operation came to a head in 2012 with Procopi's arrest. He was charged with international fossil trafficking, document forgery, and smuggling. When brought to trial, he confessed and cooperated with the authorities. Thanks to that agreement, more than 18 significant fossils were recovered and returned to Mongolia. A symbolic victory for paleontology, but also a sobering revelation. The black market was far more active, organized, and globalized than anyone had imagined. And the most shocking part? Many fossils are still missing, and many buyers still have no idea that what's sitting in their living rooms or their office lobbies is the result of a crime. Some of those names remain in the shadows, others not so much. And yes, a few of them are people you definitely know. But before we reveal who they are, you need to understand how this market evolved and how it managed to survive even in the digital age. Because believe it or not, the black market for fossils also moved online. And what's happening on the deep web might be even darker than you think. If you thought fossil trafficking ended with the arrest of Eric Procopi, think again. What happened next was exactly what happens to any criminal market when the system starts closing in. It adapted, and it migrated to the darkest corner of the internet, the deep web. Today, the rarest fossils on Earth aren't just being sold in luxury showrooms or red carpet auction houses. They're being traded anonymously, in encrypted forums where every seller uses a code name and every buyer pays through digital wallets. Bitcoin, Ethereum, welcome to the new currency of crime. And the most absurd part? Many of the fossils being sold haven't even been cataloged by science. That means there are entire species, unknown to humanity, being sold like decorative statues. A potentially groundbreaking species, one that could rewrite what we know about prehistory, being shipped via express mail to a collector who might not even realize what they've bought. Some of these fossils are listed as geological artifacts. Others are labeled with vague terms like ornamental bones or museum pieces. But anyone who knows what they're looking at sees the real value, and they pay a lot. Undercover paleontologists have already discovered skulls, vertebrae, teeth, egg fragments, and even nearly complete skeletons being offered on these shadowy marketplaces, complete with photos, detailed descriptions, price tags, And of course, no paper trail. And as unbelievable as it sounds, the buyers are still the same. Eccentric millionaires, CEOs, heirs to fortunes, and yes, celebrities. At this point, the line between legal auctions and illegal markets has become so blurry that many don't even know which side they're on. And others would rather not know, which opens the door to a new problem: fakes. Because wherever there's money and mystery, there's also a scam. And in this underworld, not everything that looks like a fossil actually is one. The black market has its tricks too, and some of them are remarkably sophisticated. Some sellers take real bones from different animals and piece them together into hybrid creatures. Others sculpt missing parts from resin, plaster, or even 3D printed materials, all handcrafted to look authentic. And the worst part? They do it so well that even experts need lab testing to spot the fraud. One infamous example was the Archaeoraptor, announced in 1999 as the missing link between dinosaurs and birds. The fossil was even featured in National Geographic, until tests revealed the truth. It was a Frankenstein-like composite of two different species, glued together with cement and mortar. A prehistoric hoax sold as scientific gold. And the targets of these scams? The wealthiest, least informed, and most status-obsessed buyers. Some pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for pieces that are completely worthless. Others fall into more dangerous traps, like buying real fossils that were illegally taken from their country of origin and sold with fake documents. And when authorities eventually catch on, the scandal explodes. Now, remember back at the beginning of the video, when I mentioned that two Hollywood superstars once went head-to-head over an insanely rare dinosaur fossil. Well, the time has come to reveal that story, or rather, that fact. Get ready, because I'm about to tell you who those two actors were, and what really went down in that million-dollar auction. You'll see how one of them ended up caught in one of the biggest fossil trafficking scandals of the modern era. So buckle up. This reveal is just as wild as everything you've heard so far. The year was 2007. A high-profile fossil auction was taking place in Beverly Hills, complete with luxury carpets, champagne flowing, and heated bidding wars among wealthy collectors. Among the most coveted items of the night was an almost complete Tarbosaurus skull, a close relative of the T-Rex, discovered in Mongolia's Gobi Desert. What no one in that room knew was that the fossil had been illegally smuggled out of Mongolia and was already being tracked by international authorities. But that didn't stop two very familiar Hollywood faces from entering a head-to-head bidding war for the fossil. On one side, Leonardo DiCaprio, Academy Award winner and star of Titanic, The Revenant, and The Wolf of Wall Street. On the other, Nicolas Cage, known for National Treasure, Con Air, and Ghost Rider. Both were determined to take the skull home. The bids kept rising until Cage won, paying roughly $276,000 for the piece. And for a while, the fossil sat proudly in his private collection, a true Jurassic trophy Hollywood style. But investigators hadn't forgotten. Years later, the FBI showed up at Cage's door. The fossil's origins had been traced back to the auction, and Mongolia was demanding it back as stolen cultural property. Upon learning he had unknowingly bought an illegal item, Cage cooperated with authorities and voluntarily returned the fossil. No charges were filed against him, as there was no evidence he was involved in the smuggling. Just a case of bad luck, wrong fossil, wrong place, wrong time. And what about DiCaprio? He lost the auction by just a hair. If he had won, maybe his name would have made headlines. That's the wildest part of this story. It shows that the fossil black market doesn't care about fame or fortune. You can be a movie star and still find yourself tangled in a scandal involving international smuggling, paleontology, and a 70-million-year-old dinosaur. Now be honest. Did you ever imagine Leonardo DiCaprio and Nicolas Cage once went head-to-head over a dinosaur fossil in a million-dollar auction? And that the FBI actually knocked on one of their doors? Drop a comment below. Was it the actors, the bidding war, or McDonald's buying a T-Rex that shocked you the most? I want to know what made your jaw drop. Now, as we near the end of the story, you might be wondering, what's the most terrifying part of all this? The fact that this was just one case among many. Even today, thousands of fossils remain missing, Others are hidden away in private rooms, protected by contracts, lawyers, and silence. But in the end, what's truly at stake isn't just the possession of an ancient bone. It's the possession of Earth's history. And that's exactly what we're going to explore now, in the final chapter of this journey. In the end, this story isn't just about money, crime, or celebrity drama. It's about loss. Every fossil illegally removed from the ground, every bone smuggled, every piece sold behind closed doors represents something far greater than a price tag at an auction. It represents a page in Earth's history that may never be read again. Because when a fossil is excavated outside of proper scientific standards, it loses its context. And without context, it loses information. The type of surrounding rock, the position of the bones, the depth at which it was found, the sediment layers, all of it helps scientists understand how the animal behaved, what kind of environment it lived in, which species it coexisted with, and even how it might have died. But when a black market digger rips that fossil from the ground without care and throws it straight onto the market, all of that knowledge is lost. It's like tearing a page out of a rare book and selling just the cover art. Pretty to look at, but empty in meaning. And more than that, the fossil trade blocks children, students, and researchers around the world from accessing discoveries that should belong to all of us. Because these bones don't belong to whoever can pay the most. They belong to humanity. Yes, some efforts are being made. Countries like Mongolia, Brazil, and China are actively fighting to recover stolen fossils. Operations like Raptor have paved the way for new laws, international agreements, and tighter enforcement. But the challenge is massive. The market is silent, powerful, and extremely well connected. That's why simply knowing this story is, in itself, an act of resistance. The more people understand the true value of fossils, not as trophies, but as capsules of knowledge, the less room there will be for trafficking, forgery, and the destruction of science. Because the truth is this: these bones aren't just from the past. They are what connect us to the very beginning. And protecting them means protecting our story. If the story shocked you as much as it did me, just imagine what else might still be buried out there, beneath the surface or hidden behind million-dollar curtains. Let me know in the comments what part of this fossil underworld blew your mind the most. And if you want to keep digging up forgotten truths with us, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and get ready, because the next stories are even more unbelievable. See you in the next video.